Have you ever wondered what happens after we depart from this earthly realm? Today, we explore the profound vision of the prophet Ezekiel in the 37th chapter of his book, a vision of dry bones coming back to life. Delving into the heart of this prophecy, we find ourselves in a vast valley filled with dry, lifeless bones. This is no ordinary valley, but a place that embodies desolation and forgotten lives. The bones, scattered and strewn about, are a stark representation of hopelessness and despair, a poignant picture of death in its most absolute form. Now, Ezekiel was not just a casual observer in this desolate valley. He was an active participant, guided by the divine to inspect these bones, to really see them for what they were. It was an encounter that was meant to stir him, to challenge him, and ultimately, to reveal a profound truth to him. As he navigated this valley of dry bones, he was asked a question: can these bones live? A question that, on the surface, seems absurd. How can that which is devoid of life, devoid of any sign of vitality, be brought back to life? But then, something extraordinary happened. A wind swept across the valley, a divine wind, a life-giving breath that stirred these dry bones into action. They rattled and shook. They came together, they were covered with sinews and flesh, and they were filled with breath, with life. This was no ordinary wind, but the breath of God, the same breath that brought the first man to life in the Garden of Eden. So what does this all mean? What does this vision of dry bones coming back to life represent? The dry bones symbolize the people of Israel in exile, feeling dead and hopeless. The divine wind, or breath, represents God's promise to restore them, to bring them back to life. So, in the first part of this prophetic vision, we see a seemingly impossible transformation, dry bones becoming living beings. But what does this symbolize? Now, let's dive deeper into the interpretation of this vision. What does it mean when lifeless dry bones are resurrected? Let's examine the interpretation as given by Ezekiel himself. This vision, as mystical as it may seem, is a metaphor for the restoration of the nation of Israel. The dry bones symbolize a nation that was spiritually dead and physically devastated. But, as we see in the vision, these bones didn't stay lifeless. This is where the divine intervention comes in. The winds breathe life into the bones, which then form bodies and come alive. This is not just a physical resurrection, but also a spiritual renewal. Just as the bones were brought back to life, so too was the nation of Israel to be restored. The imagery is powerful and profound, a valley full of dry bones, representing a nation that had lost all hope, all vitality. But then, with the breath of life, these bones rise, they form bodies, they become a vast army. This is a picture of resurrection, of rebirth, of renewal, and this is what was prophesied for the nation of Israel. The nation, much like the dry bones, was to rise from its despair, from its desolation. It was to experience a rebirth, a revival. The dead bones were to become a living, breathing, thriving nation once again. This was not just a promise, but a prophecy. The bones, then, are not just bones. They represent a nation that was once full of life, full of vitality, but had become spiritually dead and physically devastated. But the vision doesn't end there. The breath of life, the divine intervention, brings the bones back to life, restores the nation. This is a powerful message of hope, of renewal, of resurrection. It tells us that no matter how desolate, how devastated, how lifeless we may be, there is always the possibility of renewal, of resurrection. The dry bones, then, represent a nation that was spiritually dead and physically devastated, but through divine intervention, they were brought back to life. So, we've talked about the dry bones and their resurrection, but there's more to this vision. What is the promise that comes with this restoration? In Ezekiel's vision, the promise of restoration is multi-layered, each layer echoing a profound message of hope, unity, and spiritual renewal. Picture this: a land torn apart, divided, its bones dry and lifeless, and then a promise of restoration that breathes life into the lifeless, unites the divided, and instills a spirit that was once lost. The first layer of this promise is the reunification of a divided kingdom. The land of Israel, which had been split into two, the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah, would become one again. Imagine the joy of a family reunited after a long separation. The divisions that had once caused strife and conflict would be healed, and the people would live together in harmony. Next, The promise extends beyond the physical realm to the spiritual. The people of Israel, once spiritually arid, would experience an indwelling of God's Spirit. Picture a desert transformed into a lush oasis, brimming with life. That's the kind of spiritual renewal that was promised. God's Spirit would not just visit the people, but reside within them, guiding them, nurturing them, and empowering them to live according to His will. Finally, the promise of restoration carries with it an assurance of God's enduring presence. The people of Israel would not be abandoned or forgotten. Instead, they would be carefully tended to, loved, and cherished. Like a shepherd who never leaves his flock, God would be with His people, in good times and in bad, in joy and in sorrow. And so, through this vision, God promises not only physical restoration, but also spiritual renewal and unity for His people. This promise is not just for the people of Israel, but for all who seek restoration and renewal. This is the promise that echoes through the ages, reminding us that no situation is beyond hope, no division beyond healing, and no spirit beyond renewal. Now, you might be wondering, how does this ancient vision relate to us today? Well, let's dive right into it. The themes of hope, restoration, and spiritual renewal that are so vividly painted in Ezekiel's vision are not just relevant, but deeply resonant in our lives today. Imagine the dry bones as symbols of our own spiritual desolation, the times when we feel bereft, disconnected, or simply lost in the wilderness of life. We've all been there, haven't we? It's a universal human experience. Yet, just as Ezekiel witnessed the dry bones coming back to life, we too can experience a profound spiritual awakening. This vision serves as a powerful reminder that no matter how desperate or dire our circumstances may seem, there is always hope for rejuvenation and renewal. It's an affirmation that even in the face of overwhelming odds, we possess the capacity to rise, to heal, and to thrive once more. In the context of communities, think about the numerous challenges we face today. Be it social inequality, environmental crises, or the struggles with mental health. These issues can often leave us feeling helpless, like a valley of dry bones. Yet Ezekiel's vision implores us to remember that change is possible, that restoration is within reach. It inspires us to strive towards spiritual growth, to foster a sense of unity and resilience, and to collectively overcome these hurdles. It sends a powerful message that when we come together, when we lean on each other, we can transform even the driest valley into a vibrant, thriving landscape. And so, the relevance of Ezekiel's vision today is not just in its symbolic representation of hope and restoration, but in its call to action. It challenges us to rise above our circumstances, to seek spiritual renewal, and to play our part in the restoration of our communities. Just as the dry bones in Ezekiel's vision were brought back to life, so too can we experience spiritual renewal and restoration in our lives. Let's remember this as we navigate the complexities of our world, and may it inspire us to strive for a better tomorrow. So, what are the key points we can take away from Ezekiel's vision of the dry bones? Firstly, let's reflect on the symbolism of the dry bones. These bones represent the spiritual state of desolation and hopelessness, but as the vision unfolds, these bones, once lifeless and scattered, are brought back to life, symbolizing rebirth and rejuvenation. Moving on, the interpretation of the vision is equally profound. It is not just a spectacle to behold, but a message to be understood. Ezekiel's vision is a divine promise of restoration. The bones coming together, the flesh covering them, and the breath giving them life, it's all symbolic. It represents the divine power to revive, renew, and restore. This brings us to the promise of restoration. The vision assures us that no matter how bleak or desolate the situation may seem, restoration is possible. It's a promise of hope, a beacon that shines through the darkest of times. It reminds us that despair is never the end, and that even the driest bones can be made to live again. Lastly, let's discuss the relevance of the vision today. In a world where we often find ourselves in situations that seem hopeless, where despair seems to reign, Ezekiel's vision is a timely reminder. It tells us that there's always room for hope, for revival, and for restoration. The vision of the dry bones is not just a historical or spiritual symbol, it's a relevant and powerful metaphor for our lives today. In summary, Ezekiel's vision of the dry bones is a profound narrative that carries a timeless message. It's about despair and hope, desolation and restoration, death and life. It's a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, renewal is possible, and hope can spring from the most unlikely of places. Remember, no matter how dry or lifeless a situation may seem, there is always the possibility of renewal and restoration. This is the powerful message of Ezekiel's vision of the dry bones.